had one for 4 weeks. Oh, I feel that air now. It's so
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's call the meeting to order. Please silence your phones if you haven't done so already. Tonight's meeting is a little different because we're going to be canvassing the election. So we'll have the first part of our meeting will be to close out business with this council, and then we'll go to oath of office for the new council members. So first, if you wouldn't mind, join me in the invocation, and Pastor Calabretta is going to offer that for us.
Let's pray together. Father, thank you once again for your grace and mercy. You've put your hand upon this city. We thank you for it. I pray that you bless the mayor and the city council, the new members coming on, that they might be able to consider what's best for the city, what's best for the people here, what's best for business, all these kinds of things that they have on their minds. And so I pray that you would just do some great things through each one that's here. Thank you once again that we have the freedom we do. Thank you that you've blessed us by giving us this country, this state, this county, and this city. And so we need your help and blessings tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd have to go through that again.
All right, items of community interest. This is regarding the council. There will not be another meeting this month, and there will only be one meeting in December, which will be Monday, December the 9th. So mark your calendars for that. Next on the agenda is the city manager's report.
Hooray, hooray. We were finally able to open the Nelson Street, Mill Street intersection last Thursday. Needless to say, we're not happy that the project took so long for the contractor to finish. We will now begin the process of figuring out what the contractor owes for the penalty clause of the contract, which amounted to $700 a day, plus the extra expense of engineering having to the engineer having to redesign the bridge support structure on the upstream end of the bridge that was not constructed according to the plans. I will keep the council informed of our progress. We pretty much got a final figure, and we're throwing that at the contractor, and if he agrees, then it'll reduce the amount of the contract probably in the vicinity of $47,000 to $50,000. So our sewer line project is at a standstill. I'm trying to get an easement for the Glen Hills lift station, but the property owner is not communicating with us. I've contacted our city attorney, who happens to be here tonight, and she's gonna work with us to try to get the process sped up so that we can get the easement for that property and get that work going. The work on the substation transformer project is proceeding well. All the pads and foundation for the new equipment and structures have been finished. Brazos Electric is now doing their part of the project. In fact, they've left. They've finished what they can do so far. They're waiting till we get one particular structure in place before they can finish their part of the project. The structures are custom, special order, and it's going to take a while to get them, and that's going to be the holdup in the whole thing from now on. The transformer has been delivered to Bowie. You probably saw it in the paper. It came last Friday. While we were waiting on the transformer to arrive, we moved the two 4,200-pound switches to their pads, which sit next to the transformer. The transformer came today and started to reassemble the transformer and should be finished by this Friday. The main holdup is going to be getting the custom-built structures here and erected so that Brazos Electric can finish their part of the project. Should only take a week to complete. Hopefully we will have the new transformer in operation around the middle of January. Jay informed me that I was hoping with both hands, because he said he doesn't think it'll be finished by then, but, you know, I'm praying that everything works out just right and we get those structures in. As some of you know, there's an independent group of folks that are working on getting a hospital district formed so that we can reopen the emergency room. They had an organizational meeting last month and are meeting again tonight to continue the process. It's my understanding that they are gathering information on what is needed to continue the process. Committees have been formed and assigned different jobs that need to be done. The next election cycle for a vote is in May, so we might be able to vote on a hospital district as early as next May. The main thing is there's moving forward and trying to get it done. It's funny how word travels fast that the ER closed last month. I have been contacted by 2 different companies that want to offer teledoc services for Bowie and the surrounding area. I had a meeting with one of the companies yesterday. If I get any information today, I'll tell you about it. And if you want to know about what they're offering, please come by my office and we'll sit down and I'll explain it to you, but you can only come 2 at a time. So the handout you received tonight is a 3-year water rate study that I've been doing over the last 3 months. I planned on giving it to you at the presentation of tonight's meeting, but the length of the meeting was such that it would be better to show the presentation at the next meeting, which will be December the 9th, and then I can answer questions from the council about the study and the requested water rate increases. If you have any questions about the study between now and then, please come to my office, 1 or 2 at a time, and I'll be happy to explain the numbers to you. Any questions?
No questions? All right, let's move on to the consent agenda items. The minutes for the October 28th meeting is in your packet, along with the city manager, the authorization to write off for electric, for utilities, and for the library. Also in your packet is the financial statement. That's the year-end financial statement for the end of our fiscal year. Pam is here. If you looked over it and you have any questions for her, she can answer those questions now. Do you have any highlights that you want to offer the council?
Just the front, oh, excuse me. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Also, on behalf of the Finance Department and Human Resources, I'd like to say thank you to Councilman Bates, Gunner, and McEwen for your support over the last couple years. So thank you. The highlights on this is you should be pleased all in all, especially with the increased cost of goods and supplies. If you go down to your expenses in your water and sewer and electric, they went up, but your expenses and supplies have went up drastically in cost. But your revenue went up also. So it's looking really well. Your purchase power, it did go up 163,000, but as I call it, the TOS, that rate went up. Bert's going to tell you it's something else, but what do you call it?
The TCOS.
The TCOS.
There you go. I call it TOS. So that went up in cost, and that's the reason for the increase. On the general fund, you'll be very pleased that our property tax did go up 158 as far as collections. Our sales tax went up 40,000. The significant one is your hotel motel tax. That's sitting at 122,000 year to date through these financials, and that's the most the city's collected in one physical.
Since before 2020, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So your ambulance is done very well also. That went up $2,463 billing wise, but the significant part of that is your collections that we collected in went up almost 75,000.
Cool.
So I'd answer any quick questions you may have.
If not, you can always call her after the meeting.
Yeah, 1 or 2 at a time. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
And Mayor.
Thank you. All right, so I would entertain a motion to accept everything as presented.
So moved.
Post, do I have a second?
Second.
Gunner? Ashley?
Aye.
Bates?
Aye.
Post?
Aye.
McEwen?
Aye.
And Gunner?
Aye.
All right, thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is to canvass the election. You saw in your packet the vote tallies. Canvassing the election means that the council approves the numbers presented to them. The official results. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to accept the canvas totals as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Gunner? Ashley? Bates?
Aye.
Post?
Aye.
McEwen?
Aye.
Gunner?
Aye.
And Ashley. All right, so now at this time, we go to saying goodbye to our council members. We'd like to present to the council members their parting gifts. So, TJ, I'm sure Barbara wants pictures, so if you'll meet me out front. So, you know, I've been here a few years, and you served the shortest amount of time in order to get one of
I'm not sure that was a very good goodbye right there. Perfect.
All right, you've been here with us 4 years, right? Yes. So, we are very grateful. Thank you for participating, and you can always run again. Wait. Oh, she wants your picture. I've never seen the man so anxious to get this and go. You've been here for us every time we needed that position taken care of. We appreciate it. Thank you. If you will leave your financials for the next person. And take your knives.
Stay these here too?
Can't leave your iPad. Oh, take it. You bring it to Sandy tomorrow. Yes.
Love you.
If you need some help with that, bring it to Sandy and she'll help you with it. Okay, very good.
I see they're leaving.
Yes, we do. I'll think of something. All right, so now we will swear in council precinct member number 1, which I believe is Mr. Brandon Walker. Again, we're gonna stand right there because Barbara loves to take pictures of all of us. I'm gonna ask you to repeat after me, and I'll swear you into the office. I, your name? Oh, raise your right hand, sorry. Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties in the office of City of Bowie Council Precinct 1 of the state of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state. So help me God. Thank you. Welcome to the council. No, that's not. Oh, let me make an announcement. That's not Laura. Precinct number 2 is Laura Sproles. She has been sworn in before the meeting because she injured herself sufficiently enough to require a trip to the hospital. So the law requires her to be sworn in today. So that is what happens. She won't be here tonight. So I will ask Larry Truax to come forward. City of Bowie, Council Precinct 3. Council Precinct 3 of the state of Texas, and to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Welcome to the council, sir. I think she's got you right here. Right here, right here.
I just need you to sign right there, please.
All right. The next item on the agenda is for the new council, which is an election of Mayor Pro Tem. I will remind you all that Brent Shaw is still on the council. He is in Precinct 1. He is the existing Mayor Pro Tem, and he was out of town tonight, so he wasn't able to make this meeting for that same reason. So, at this time, an election of Mayor Pro Tem, a nomination for a Mayor Pro Tem can be accepted from the council members.
I nominate Brent Shaw.
Brent Shaw,
I'll second that.
you'll second it, okay? So Ashley Post for Brent Shaw. So Sproles is out. Shaw is out. So the first vote will go to Truax. Ashley,
Aye.
Post,
Aye.
and Walker. That's easy enough, painless. I know he'll be appreciative of that because it was a position that he wanted to continue.
And it makes it a lot easier for everyone, so you don't have to sign all that stuff and get it all.
That is so true. Let's see, Sandy, I think I picked up one of these. Oh, okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the council orientation, which is going to be presented by our city attorney, Courtney Goodman-Morris, and I really, really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
This is the first time in many years. We've had 3 council members at one time completely turn over. So I think it would be very advantageous.
Happy to do it.
Sandy just passed out to you guys a packet that she has brought to us for your orientation.
Okay, and Mayor and Council, congratulations, new council members. Thanks for having me here tonight to visit with you about what your job is. So I'm trying to remember, I think Stephanie and the mayor are the only 2 of you I've met before.
I
So.
think we met Brent, but he's not here.
Well, yeah, he's not here. So the rest of you are pretty new. So basically, what we're going to talk about is what your job is, what kind of city this is, and really how the sausage is made. You know, what is it that make local governments run? So there are different kinds of cities in the state of Texas. Some are called general law cities, and some are called home rule cities. You are a home rule city. What that means is you have a charter and you make your own rules within the guidelines of the Texas Local Government Code and other laws of the state of Texas. Pretty much, you can do what you want. Now, there are some areas where you cannot regulate. You are preempted by the state. A general law city is different. A general law city can only do what it says in the laws they can do. You are like a corporation, more like a corporation. In fact, you are a corporation. So you make your own rules. The mayor is your presiding officer, so like the CEO of a corporation. The mayor only votes if there is a tie. You are governed by the city's charter and state law. So if you have not read your charter, I suggest that you do so. It's chock full of good information. And I guess you have to be a nerd like me to get into city charters. Okay, so you're made up of a mayor and 6 council members. You have a council manager form of government. There are different forms of government. In smaller cities, there is no city manager. In many cases, there's just the mayor and one or two staff members. But you, as a home rule city, have the council manager form of government. That means you act more like a board of directors. You set policy. You set overarching goals. You say what your vision is for the city, and then you hire people to carry that out, and that's Bert, your city manager. He's the person who is the administrator of your city. Other appointed positions include your municipal court judge and your city secretary. They're appointed by you. All other employees are hired by your city manager and report to the city manager. The mayor, what is the role of the mayor? Well, the mayor is the ceremonial head of the city, signs all city documents, is the chief executive officer. You're a little bit different than some cities because your mayor has veto power. In a lot of cities, mayors do not have veto power, but that is one of those interesting things in your charter. Now, the body itself can override a veto at a following meeting, but if something happens, if some piece of legislation comes up and the council approves it, the mayor can say no. And that means it's got to come before the council again. So the mayor's job is to preside over meetings and preserve decorum. The mayor pro tem assumes the duties of the mayor when the mayor is temporarily unavailable or, because of illness or vacation or whatever, the mayor can't be available for a meeting. So as you are all aware, I'm sure you have a place system. You have 6 places elected at large, 2 from each of 3 precincts. We've really talked about this next page already, that you are the legislative body. Your primary duty is policy making. Your other responsibilities include regulatory matters. That's land use, that's zoning, that's plat approval. And we'll talk more about what those things are. But that's one of the jobs that you have. Of course, you have a financial duty to set the tax rate for the city and levy those taxes. You are an employer. You hire city staff, and then you have purchasing responsibilities. Under state law, purchases over a certain dollar amount have to be approved by the city council. Under a certain dollar amount, they can be approved by staff. But that's basically your role. Your role is to run the city. So now let's talk about what kind of liability comes along with that. For discretionary acts, you enjoy official immunity. So if somebody sues the city for something you've enacted, some ordinance you've enacted, you enjoy official immunity. That means you cannot be sued for that particular thing. You also have ministerial duties. Those are duties that you don't have any discretion in. If you don't do those duties, you can be sued and you can be held liable. The big 2 that come to mind when I'm talking about these 2 things is zoning. That's discretionary. You can decide what the future of the city should look like. But platting is different. A plat that comes before you that meets all the requirements of your code, you have a ministerial duty to approve, and if you don't, the city and you as individuals can be sued. Of course, there are lots of other acts you can be sued for: violations of the Open Meetings Act, failure to disclose a conflict of interest, which we'll talk about what those are too, purchasing violations, and then, of course, more criminal or acts that are more criminal in nature, sexual harassment, bribery, falsification, forgery, theft, those kinds of things. You would face personal liability for. So as I go through this, if you have any questions, feel feel free to stop me because I'll just power through this stuff. So don't be afraid to say, hey, wait a minute, I want to talk about that a little more. So next is city council meetings. The purpose of the city council meeting is for you to conduct the business of the city. According to the website and your code of ordinances, you meet on the second and fourth Mondays. You can also have special meetings if something comes up that cannot wait for a council meeting. Special meetings can be called at the request of the mayor or 3 council members. Rules of procedure. How do your meetings operate? Well, that's up to you to decide. Some cities have specific written rules about how things operate. Some cities do not. Tends to be larger cities that have written specific rules. You may have rules, I don't know. But if you do, they are probably written down somewhere. Citizens have a reasonable opportunity to be heard on agenda items. Open forums are not required. You do not have to have a citizens' comment period for citizens to come up and say whatever they want to say on whatever topic they want to say it on. The only requirement is that citizens have the opportunity to be heard on matters that are on your agenda. That can be in an open forum at the beginning. That can be during or before the discussion of a particular agenda item. But there's been a lot of, in the last several years, a lot of cities have had trouble with citizens forums getting out of control, aggressive, being used as an opportunity to make personal attacks against city staff and council members. And so this is just kind of a reminder that you do not have to allow that. It's totally up to you. Your city may not be having a problem with it like some cities are. You can also set reasonable time limits with regard to citizens' comments. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to listen for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes. You can set it at 3 minutes or 5 or whatever is right for your community. City council meetings, typically we advise that they be governed by Robert's Rules of Order, but that you don't adopt Robert's Rules of Order, that you use them as a guide, because Robert's Rules are made for corporations, and you, although you are technically a corporation, you are a governmental body, and so those rules don't always fit everything you need to do. So we advise that you use them as a guideline. With that in mind, I'm going to go through some of the big ones. First of all, the council action is taken by approving or disapproving motions. Every single motion requires a second. So if council member Post says, I move that we approve the purchase of a computer, and you're not Councilmember Bates, Councilmember Ashley says, I second that. How you operate depends on what's best for this body. Some cities require the motion to be made and the second to be made before discussion can occur on an item. Some cities discuss the item and then make a motion, a second, and move forward. That's completely up to you. There is no requirement that you do it either way. It's whatever is best for this body. Certain items can be raised at any time and do not require a second or a vote. The mayor just decides the matter. Those are usually items that have to do with the comfort of the room, the noise level of the room. Points of privilege are complaints about noise or room temperature. Points of order are complaints about a procedure or a personal affront or something along those lines. Point of information is if you are debating a topic, you realize you don't have enough information or you don't feel like you do, one of you can raise a point of information, ask that the matter be referred to staff to get more information, and the mayor can rule on that. You can amend motions, but you have to vote, if you do amend a motion, you have to vote on the amendment for the motion before you can vote on the main motion. So if Councilmember Post said, I want to make a motion to buy a computer for $500, and Councilmember Ashley seconded that, and then discussion ensued, and we decided that we needed a more expensive computer, because you've already got a motion and second on the floor for a specific amount of money, you would need to amend the motion. So then Councilmember Ashley says, I want to amend the motion to say a $2,000 computer. You'd have to vote on that amendment to the motion. Are we gonna raise the price of what the computer costs before we decide if we're gonna buy the computer? Does that all make sense? Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Let's see. You can move to table items to a date certain. You have to have a second, and it has to be approved by a majority vote. A lot of city councils get that one wrong. They just say, okay, well, let's table this. It requires a vote. It requires a motion and requires a vote to table an item, and it has to be tabled to a date certain. Otherwise, you are simply removing it from your agenda. The Texas Open Meetings Act requires that every vote you make has to be made in public. If the vote ends in a tie, the motion fails. Order and decorum. So citizens will generally take their cues from council member behavior. Therefore, it's imperative that council members be respectful of each other, staff, and citizens. When one speaker has the floor, do not interrupt them. No vulgar or no personal attacks or use of offensive or vulgar language. Do not question the motives of other members or show contempt for members or citizens, and treat staff professionally and avoid public criticism. Concerns about staff need to be raised with the city manager in the city manager's office in private. Okay, so that's kind of the background stuff. So how does this body do business? Well, it's through ordinances and resolutions. Sometimes you approve things by what we call a minute order, where there's no ordinance or resolution. But for the most part, if it's a legislative item, if you're making a rule, it's got to be by ordinance, because it's got to go in your code of ordinances. If you're just approving a contract and saying, you know, we approve the purchase of this and we give the city manager the authority to sign the contract, that's a minute order. That doesn't require an ordinance or a resolution. But ordinances are what govern your city. They're what the public has to be able to go somewhere and read to know what the rules are in the city of Bowie. Resolutions, for the most part, are they're not legislation. They're saying this is what we want to do, or this is the direction we want to go. For example, if the city decided to, a developer was coming in and wanted to make a large development, residential development, let's just say, and they wanted a public improvement district to fund the cost of the infrastructure, then you would, by resolution, accept their application for a PID and call for a public hearing. So you're just saying, we're putting it on record that we got this application, we approved the application, or not approved, but accepted the application, and we want this set for a public hearing. Resolutions are typically things that state law requires it be done by a resolution rather than an ordinance. All votes on ordinance and resolutions are record votes. your charter requires 2 readings for approval of ordinances. Not all charters do, but yours does. So unless there is an emergency, things have to come before this body 2 times before you can approve them. So now let's talk about the city secretary. The city secretary performs the administrative and legislative duties for the city council and is responsible for preparing, keeping, and maintaining the minutes of the city council and serves as the city's records custodian. So when you pass an ordinance, the city secretary records it in the ordinance book and files it with MuniCode and makes sure that it is published and publishes all legal notices that are required. And in my experience, pretty much does everything that nobody else is assigned to do. So city secretaries have a very large job. The city attorney, we are appointed by the city council and represent the city as a client. We are directly accountable to the city council. We provide legal advice to the council, boards, commissions, and all city departments regarding municipal issues. We represent the city in legal, in lawsuits, unless the matter is covered by TML. We basically are here to help the city stay out of trouble. Municipal court, you have a municipal judge and a municipal court clerk that are appointed by the city council. They are also directly accountable to the city council, and your judge serves a 2-year term. Municipal court handles citations written by your police department and by your code enforcement. So speeding tickets, anything that is a Class C misdemeanor, the municipal court, so anything that is a ticket. If you get arrested for it, unless it's public intoxication, it's going to be a higher level charge. But everything else written by a city police officer is in the jurisdiction of the municipal court. So next is your city council agenda. All meetings are open to the public except for portions which are closed executive sessions that are allowed by law. The agenda is prepared and posted by the city secretary, and it has to be posted 72 hours, at least 72 hours before the meeting. The council and your agenda typically includes a consent agenda. Those are things that do not require discussion, typically minutes, some contract approvals, some other things. I can't remember. You had your finance, usually police department reports, things that do not require deliberation are put on your consent agenda. Then you have a deliberation agenda. These are non-routine items. These are your ordinances and resolutions and things that require discussion. Public hearings. Certain things require public hearings, like zoning changes. And public comment, if you choose to have a public comment section. Agenda items are considered in the order they are on the agenda unless the mayor, with approval of council, takes items out of order. Citizens' appearance, I think we've pretty much already talked about that, unless you would like for me to talk about it some more. Basically, it is not a Q&A. It is not a time for the public to ask you questions that you answer or staff answers. Public comment is a time for the public to comment. And you can make factual statements in response to public comment. It's usually best to say that you're referring it to staff, and somebody will get back with you. Code of conduct. The code of conduct, there's 2 different kinds of code of conduct. One is your ethical code of conduct, just how should we operate together. And then there is the legal side, which is in the local government code, which has to do with your conflicts of interest. But the purpose of the rules of ethical conduct are to ensure that public officials are independent, impartial, and responsible only to the citizens. To prevent interests, financial or otherwise, direct or indirect, or engagement in any business transaction or professional activity or anything affecting your discharge of your duties as a city council person. It prevents public office from being used for personal gain. And it ensures that, or the purpose is to ensure that boards and commissions are nonpartisan. So the Chapter 171 covers 3 specific areas and requires that no officer shall discuss or participate in a vote or decision on any matter in which the officer has a substantial interest or in the previous 12 months filed a conflict statement. You cannot represent or appear on behalf of any private interest before any city board or commission. You cannot use your official position to secure special privileges or disclose confidential information. So confidential information that you receive is typically information you receive in executive session. Any information you receive in here is obviously not confidential because this is a public meeting. But if it's discussed in executive session, it is confidential. It may at some point no longer be confidential because the purpose of executive session is to talk about lawsuits, to talk about real property interests that the city may be looking to acquire or looking to sell. And discussion in public would jeopardize the city's position in those things. So those are the kind of disclosures that cannot be made. No officer shall grant any special consideration or treatment to any citizen, individual, or business that would give that entity, business, or person a special privilege that other citizens cannot get. You cannot accept gifts from any person that might reasonably tend to influence the outcome of any decision you may make. Gifts of food, lodging, transportation, entertainment that reasonably appear to exceed $500 in value. You have to file with the city secretary within 30 calendar days of receipt of those things, a disclosure statement saying what it was, what you were there for, because you will possibly go to a very fancy restaurant and have a very fancy dinner with somebody who wants to do business with the city. As long as that is disclosed, it is not a conflict of interest. It does not apply to anything that is $50 or less in value. So t-shirts, cap, mementos, things like that are not considered, receipt of those things are not considered conflicts of interest. No officer shall, or no member of the city council, P&Z commission, or board of adjustment can participate in or vote on any land use matter. That's zoning and plating. And again, we'll talk about what those things are in just a minute. If the officer has a substantial interest in any real property within 200 feet of the real property that is the subject of the land use matter. So if there's a zoning case before this body and you own land within 200 feet of that zoning case, then you received a letter that said, hey, we're changing zoning on this, you cannot vote on that matter because the decision, according to state law, has a different effect on your property than it does on anybody else's. No member of the city council who is on the governing body of a nonprofit organization shall vote on any funding matter that has to do with that nonprofit organization. No officer or of the city shall meet with any employee or group of employees of the city for political campaign purposes while the employee is on duty. coerce any city employee to participate in an election campaign or refrain from participating in lawful political activity. Former city council members shall not use or disclose confidential information acquired during their service on the council. This does not apply to information that's no longer confidential, disclosure of unlawful activity of law enforcement, or disclosure necessary to further public safety. Okay, so substantial interests under 171, I said there's 3 types: business, property, and relationships. We'll start with business interests. If you own stock or have an ownership interest in a business that is 10% of more of the voting stock or shares of the business entity, or you own 10% or more, or $15,000 of more or more of the fair market value of the business entity, or funds received by you from the business entity exceed 10% of your gross income, then we have to move to step 2. Will the action have a special economic effect on the business entity that is distinguishable from the effect on the general public? If the answer is yes, you have a substantial interest and you cannot take part in a decision on that matter. So 10% of the voting stock worth $15,000, or you get 10% of your income from it, then you move to step 2. Will the decision have a special economic benefit on that business that is different than the general public? If it does, you have an interest and you have to disclose it, number 1, and not vote on the issue. Real property. That's the second one. If you have an equitable legal ownership in real property with a fair market value of $2,500 or more, and the action on the matter will have a special economic benefit on the value of that real property that is distinguishable from the effect on the value to the public, then you have a substantial interest in the real property and you have to recuse yourself from the matter. Substantial interests in relationship have to do with being related to persons that are before the board or before the city council. The public official is considered to have special interest if a person related to the official in the first degree by consanguinity or affinity has a substantial interest. First degree, mom, dad, brother, sister. That's consanguinity, relationships by blood. So if your mom, dad, brother, sister have an interest, then you have a substantial interest and must recuse yourself. Affinity is a marriage interest. Your spouse, your mother-in-law or father-in-law, or your spouse's children is a first degree interest that you would have to recuse yourself from. State law requires if a substantial interest is determined, you must file an affidavit with the city secretary revealing the nature of the interest. You must abstain from deliberation on the matter and leave the room while it's being discussed. If you do not, it is a violation, which is a Class A misdemeanor, and can be punished up to $4,000 and 1 year in jail. Any question about substantial interests? Okay, so now let's talk about procurement. This is where you buy stuff. There are several chapters in Texas law, there are several laws that deal with procurement, but the big one is Chapter 252 of the Local Government Code, and it requires that before a city can enter into a contract of $50,000 or more, the city has to comply with requests for sealed bids or qualifications, requests for proposals. Cities can also use a reverse auction procedure or comply with the methods under 2269, which are design, build, big public works things. So for the most part, cities deal with 252 unless you're doing a very, very large project. So 50,000 or more, it has to go out for bid. The city prepares the bid package, the specifications, everything that needs to be purchased for this project, and publishes notice that it is seeking bids on the proposal. Must either include the contract documents, specifications, or information on how to obtain a copy of those documents. The bids have to be opened in public and read aloud. Cities receive the sealed competitive bids and publish the date, time, and location, publicly opens the bids, and again reads them aloud. Contracts for goods or services must be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder or to the bidder who provides goods and services at the best value for the city. We typically recommend that you include best value language in your contracts because that gives the city a little bit of leeway in making awards, because best value contracts, the city can consider not only the purchase price, but the reputation, the quality, past relationships the city has had with the bidder, or any other relevant information when it's deciding who to award the bid to. Chapter 252, or basically procurement laws, do not apply if you have an emergency, if there is a public calamity, or if there is unforeseen damage to public property, or to procurement for personal, professional, or planning services. So your city attorney, you didn't have to go out for bid. You can hire professionals without going through the public procurement process. You can also purchase land and right-of-way, purchase items available from a sole source. If there's only one place you can get it, you don't have to go out for bid for it. Also, purchases made under interlocal contracts or cooperative purchasing. There are a lot of cities who have already done a big procurement, done a bidding process, and it goes out on what's called a bid board or a buy board. And cities can purchase off that buy board because a city has, it's such a large quantity of something, or a specialty item, any number of things. But cities can purchase off the buy board because a city has already gone through this process and determined a low responsible bidder. Okay, that's all on purchasing, which is very quick and not, I didn't provide you a whole lot of detail that your finance director, who's not here anymore, knows. So if you have questions, make sure you ask her about purchasing questions. So now we're going to talk about zoning, and then we'll talk about platting. Zoning is the area where you have discretion, so you cannot be sued for zoning decisions. So what is zoning? Zoning provides, basically is how you divide up the city and decide where things are going to be, how the city's going to grow, what it's going to look like. Zoning districts can be just any number of shapes and sizes that is best to promote public health, safety, and welfare, and to preserve certain places. You may have a historical downtown, or a historical or a cultural area, or an architecturally significant area that you want to preserve. That you do it through zoning. Within each zoning district, the city can regulate the land use and the location and use of buildings and other structures. Along with zoning, now this zoning is what your actual law is. Cities have what's called a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan lays out what the city should look like over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Where your growth is occurring. Should it be industrial? Should it be single family? Should it be whatever, a city park? All of those things go into your comprehensive plan. In addition to the city's zoning map and ordinances, the city adopts the comprehensive plan to provide long-range planning for the city. The Texas Supreme Court has held that the council on each rezoning case does not redetermine the comprehensive plan. The duty is to obey the existing comprehensive plan. So if you're making a zoning change that is not in accordance with your comprehensive plan, you need to consider that carefully and look at either amending your comprehensive plan or denying the zoning request. Comprehensive plans can be amended by ordinance after notice and hearing. So again, your comprehensive plan is not your zoning. It's your long-range planning tool. Your current zoning, your existing zoning is posted on your website and shows what areas in the city are to be used for what purposes. So what are the purposes of zoning regulations? Number one is to lessen congestion on streets, secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers, promote general health and welfare, provide adequate light and air, prevent overcrowding of land, avoid undue concentration of population, or facilitate provision of transportation, water, sewers, schools, parks, and other public requirements. And all of that is directly out of the local government code, chapter 211. Review criteria for zoning changes. These are the things that you should consider when you're looking at a zoning change. Number one is the proposed change in accordance with the comprehensive plan. Will the proposed change be appropriate in relationship to the immediate area, the general area, and the city as a whole? Is the proposed change in accord with existing or proposed plans for providing schools, streets, water, sewer? You also can consider the amount of vacant land currently classified for similar development in that vicinity or anywhere else in the city. How areas designated for similar development are likely to be affected if the proposed area is approved. Any other factor that will substantially affect public health, welfare, safety, morals. An inquiry into the operational aspects or intended use of the business, number of employees, products that are gonna be offered, elevations, what it's gonna look like, landscaping. Those are not acceptable when you're talking about zoning. When you're talking about straight zoning, you're not looking at any of that yet. That's what you do when you're looking at plating. So what are the zoning districts in Bowie? You have the agricultural district, single-family residential with manufactured housing parks, multifamily residential, commercial, central business, 2 different industrial districts, one for light industrial, one for heavy. You have 2 planned developments in the city. You have floodplain zoning, and then there are specific use permits that we're going to talk about in more detail in just a minute. So what is agricultural zoning? Well, that's what land usually, that's what it's zoned when it is annexed into the city, and if it's never been rezoned for any reason, it's agricultural. That's basically open land. You can continue farming, ranching, gardening, whatever it's being used for is continued. Single-family residential provides for a minimum residential building site of 6,500 square feet. It's low to medium density, single-family detached housing. So that means single-family houses on lots. We're not talking about duplexes. We're not talking about apartments. They're just single-family houses. They're not attached to another housing unit. Single-family manufactured housing provides for a minimum residential building site also of 6,500 square feet, but also allows manufactured housing. Your manufactured housing district allows manufactured homes that are up to HUD code in a park development system. So a manufactured home park. And the minimum square footage on those is 5,000 square feet. Your industrial, you have heavy industrial. That accommodates industrial uses that are not appropriate next to residential uses because they create noise or traffic or odor or anything that would be incompatible with a residential use. Your I-1 district is typically closer to, it's a less noisy, less nuisance type use, but is still industrial, and it's usually closer to your residential housing. Planned developments. I believe I think when I looked at your code, you have 2 planned developments.
Yes.
And those are typically for larger tracts of land or tracts with unique characteristics that requires some flexibility in what the zoning regulations are. In larger growing cities, it's usually a multi-purpose where you've got residential and some retail, and you might have different single-family residential combined with maybe duplexes and things that just create a community. Your floodplain district is a zoning district in flood hazard areas which are subject to periodic inundation. Limited uses are allowed and engineering studies are required before you can build in those areas. Specific use permits. Specific use permits, and we're going to talk about a little bit more, are zoning changes. When you approve a specific use permit, the use must be harmonious and adaptable to adjacent uses, and you may impose conditions and require site plans and notice before a specific use is approved. If you look at the next page, that's a picture of your zoning map that I pulled off of your website. You'll see that yellow is the predominant use. That's single-family residential. You have some small gold areas. That's your single-family manufactured home. Red with hash marks, those are your 2 planned developments. One is on Madison Street and one is south of Bacchus Street. Maroon is your central business district. Lavender, multifamily residential. It doesn't, or at least my printer didn't, my colors are not as vibrant. So lighter lavender is manufactured housing. Light pink is industrial light, and the darker pink is industrial heavy. Blue is your floodplain area. Green is agriculture, and lime green are your city parks. Now, the bubbled looking circle around, the dark lines shows your city limits. The bubble circle around is your ETJ. That's extraterritorial jurisdiction for which you have platting authority, but not zoning authority. So you can't say what everything outside of here is considered for your purposes agriculture, because it's not within your city limits. If it gets annexed into your city limits, unless it's in a planned development, it's coming in as agriculture. If it comes in as a planned development, you can approve the zoning at the same time you do the annexation.
Do we have a floodplain?
Yes, you have, and I'll let Bert address that more, but if you see the blue areas, Brushy Creek, and then there's an area that's right off of 287, and a smaller area that's kind of between 287 and 174, those are floodplain, zoned as floodplains. And Bert, do you want to provide more information about that?
If you need to see exactly where the floodplains are, I have a floodplain map in my office, hanging on the wall. The building restrictions on floodplain, what you can do, but we do have them. In fact, well, the creek that we just got through building the bridge for, some of that area is floodplain, and some of it can't be built in, in that area, but some of it can. And we eliminated a lot of the floodplain by some of the construction that we've done over there, so. But,
Good question. Anything else on that, on zoning? On what we've talked about so far about zoning? Okay, so zoning related issues. These are things that come up when you have zoning cases or zoning matters presented to the city council. You may get a written protest. A written protest that is signed by at least 20% of the owners of the property within the subject area or the area that's trying to be zoned, or within 200 feet of the subject area, requires a supermajority vote of 3/4 of all members of the city council to approve that zoning change. If you don't have a supermajority, then that zoning change is not approved. Simple majority will not approve if there is a written protest on a requested zoning change. Spot zoning, that is singling out a tract or a smaller piece of land for rezoning or preferential treatment, basically treating a piece of land different than everything around it. Now, spot zoning can get tricky. You will find areas where it looks like, oh, that's spot zoning. Well, no, it really wasn't spot zoning. That was the use that was there when the zoning map went into place, and so we had to call it something, and we didn't want to make it non-conforming, so we called it that. So there are, when your zoning issues come up, what you don't want to do is approve something that is considered spot zoning, but you may see things on your map that appear to be that probably weren't spot zoning when they were actually recorded. Contract zoning. This involves negotiating with an individual or an entity for the purpose of reaching agreement to take an action at some point in the future in a matter not currently presented to the governing body for consideration. So in other words, if you will do this for the city, we will rezone your property to whatever it is you're asking us to zone. That is different than a planned development. A planned development looks like contract zoning, but a planned development encompasses so many different aspects that it really is not contract zoning. Contract zoning is quid pro quo. You do this, you scratch my back, we'll scratch yours. Exclusionary zoning. Exclusionary zoning is establishing zoning regulatory system whose purpose is to unreasonably restrict housing opportunities for low or lower moderate income families. It is not impossible for a city to have a large lot requirement, but it must be justified for reasons that remove any questions of discriminatory bias, like lack of utility infrastructure. Your minimum zoning requirement is 6,500 square feet, so you do not have this problem at this point. If you were to change area, say, okay, we require everybody to have 5 acres, or we require everybody to have 2 acres, you might run into a problem if you did not have other areas that were more low to, or more medium density type situations. Public schools. Local zoning ordinances have very limited applicability to public school properties. The exemption is not restricted to purely educational facilities, but also includes their bus barns and ag facilities, or any facility that serves the public school district. Preemption. What can you not regulate with zoning? Number 1, the sale of alcoholic beverages, sign regulations on highways, pawn shops, sexually oriented businesses, and manufactured housing. You have to go to state law to regulate those things, and you can only regulate based on what's in state law, just like a general law city that can only do what this code says it can do. Those are areas that you are preempted. So now let's talk about takings. Takings are where the government being you, the city, you do one of two things. You either, there is a physical invasion of the property, we need this property, for example, this easement that we need to get, we tried to buy it, now we're having to start the process of taking the property, but we're not really, it's eminent domain, which is the legal way to do it. Taking is where the city just goes in, takes it, and doesn't pay anything for it. But there can also be regulatory takings, where the city enacts an ordinance or a regulation or something that deprives all economically beneficial use of the property or unreasonably interferes, measured by the severity of the economic impact and interference with the owner's distinct investment-backed expectations. This area of law is complicated. It is, it's very fact-intensive and very fact-driven. So we try to advise cities to stay away from a taking if at all possible. And a taking can apply to property, to land, or it can apply to business interests. Anytime the city affects the real or personal property, then a takings claim can result. Non-conforming uses. Non-conforming uses, and we just talked about that you might have something on your zoning map that looks like it was spot zoned. It's actually would have been a non-conforming use. In your zoning ordinance, chapter 12, section 32 deals with non-conforming uses and structures. It's a use or structure that predates the zoning regulation. Under your code of ordinances, a non-conforming use may not be expanded except off-street loading and parking, but repairs, maintenance, alterations, extensions are all acceptable as long as it does not expand past the lot line limits. If somebody stops using a property or abandons the use of a property, then the non-conforming use terminates. There has to be an overt act, and it has to be for 6 months or more. Damage by fire or act of God or other good cause may be repaired. So in some cities, if a non-conforming use is destroyed by 50% or more, then you lose your non-conforming use. In this city, there is no percentage requirement. If you have a non-conforming use, it burns to the ground, you get to rebuild it, as long as you do it within 6 months. Otherwise, you have abandoned your non-conforming use. What are vested rights? Vested rights are the right that the public has to the regulations, your local ordinances that are in place at the time they apply for a zoning change or a plat or whatever it is, then the citizen has the right to rely on what those rules are when they file their application. That becomes an issue if a development gets delayed or there's a lawsuit, something happens, and you have a change in your code of ordinances from the time the developer filed their application until the time they actually get their application approved. The vested right goes back to the time they filed their application. Whatever changed in the law, they get to rely on the old law. Now that does not apply to building codes and things that are health and safety oriented. So if there's a change in the International Residential Code, you don't get to rely on the old one. You still have to build things to standard codes. And that's it for zoning. Any questions? Okay, platting. Platting is the dividing of land into lots and blocks. It applies to any division of land that's less than 5 acres. Plats are generally just a drawing or a layout of what the property's gonna look like. Approval of a plat is ministerial. This means that a plat that fully complies with the Bowie Code of Ordinances has to be approved. It also means there's no official immunity if you fail to approve a plat that complies with the Bowie Code of Ordinances. So again, and I can't stress this enough, zoning is discretionary. You can decide what the city looks like, but once you make that call, the zoning call, on the platting side, if you get a plat that complies with the Code of Ordinances, you have to approve it or you can face liability. Plat approval is a two-step process. First, the plat is submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval and then to the City Council. Approval of the preliminary plat is required before construction of public improvements can begin. Once the final plat is approved, lots can be sold and building permits issued. There's a thing called the shot clock when it comes to platting. So once a developer or a landowner, whatever, files a plat application that is administratively complete, in other words, they've provided all the copies, they've dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's, then the Planning and Zoning Commission has 30 days to take action on that plat. If they do not take action on that plat, then, well, let's don't go there yet. So if they do not take action, it automatically is gonna come to the City Council. Some cities only have plats approved by the City Council or the Planning and Zoning, not both. In a city that has both, like you, Planning and Zoning has 30 days to act, then the City Council has 30 days to act. So it's a total of 60 days. If the plat is not acted on within that time period, then it is approved by operation of law. A plat cannot be tabled because you will violate your shot clock. If an applicant wants to, not at the request of the city, they can release the city from the 30-day timeline, but that has to be upon the request of the applicant. So if, for example, the applicant filed a plat and the Planning and Zoning starts having a hearing and all of a sudden they discover that they're missing something or they want to redo a part of the plat because of public outcry or whatever the case may be, then the applicant can say, you know what, I want to release you from the 30 days because I want to make some changes, but I don't want to have to go, there's no reason to go all the way back to the drawing board and start all over. But that is the decision of the applicant, not the city. That's it for platting. Any questions? How many of you have social media accounts? Facebook, Twitter? We're going to talk about those a little bit. Starting with public information. Two laws that cause you and city staff probably the most consternation. What is public information? Information that is collected, assembled, or maintained under law or ordinance in connection with the transaction of city business by or for the governmental body. The focus is the content, not the media. So a post on Facebook can be public information. A post or a tweet, or I don't know what they call them now that they're X's. Snapchat, private emails and text messages. Those are all examples of public information. Now, when I say private emails, I mean your email. If you use your email address to do your city business, some cities give their council members email addresses. Some do not. If you have to use your private email account, you have to save any and all city business related emails because that is public information. And if it's ever requested, then your person in charge of your public information requests are going to come to you and say, I need all those emails about XYZ so that I can disclose them. You are while your city secretary is your records custodian, she doesn't have your personal email accounts. She doesn't have your cell phones. So if you are sending text messages about city business, you have to keep those. You can't imagine how often council members, we get public information requests that say, I want all text messages about the arrest of Bert on whatever,
That's a bad example.
between the council members. Well, that's public information. We have to give it to them. So just keep in mind, you can't delete those messages. You have to hang on to them so that if and when they're requested, we can provide. That's a big deal. So that's all I'm going to talk about for public information, but now let's talk about open meetings. What is a meeting? Well, a meeting can be darn near anything. It's just what I'm going to say first and foremost. It's not written here, but that's the truth. A meeting is a deliberation between a quorum of a governmental body or between a quorum and another person, during which public business or public policy is discussed or considered, or during which the governmental body takes formal action. So if you're at Dairy Queen and there is a quorum of you sitting there drinking coffee and somebody walks up, member of the public, and wants to talk about city business, you cannot do it. Because as innocuous as it may seem, it will constitute a meeting if there is a quorum of you there. A gathering that is conducted by or for the governmental body is responsible at which, what does that say? That is conducted by or for the governmental body, and which the governmental body is responsible for, at which a quorum of members is present, that has been called by the governing body, and at which members receive or give information, ask or receive questions from third parties about public business or public policy, is a meeting. That means Facebook can be a meeting if a quorum of you post and comment on an item that is city business. So what is deliberation? Deliberation is defined as the verbal exchange during a meeting between a quorum or between a quorum and another person regarding public policy. So that's the thing, it always has to be regarding public business or public policy. Any discussion or deliberation between a quorum or between a quorum and another person regarding public business or public policy, which the board controls or supervises, or during which formal action is taken. Those are all meetings. So the question is, could communication between public officials on Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, constitute a violation of the Texas Open Meetings Act? Yes, it can. If a quorum of the board outside a publicly noticed public meeting discusses, comments, maybe even liking it is enough. Who knows with social media? Then it can constitute a violation of the open meeting, or a meeting that would be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So every regular or special called meeting requires that notice be published, that there be an agenda, and that agenda be published, giving the public 72 hours notice before the meeting of what is going to be discussed. The notice has to include the date, hour, place, subject of each meeting, including whether or not there will be an executive session or a closed portion of the meeting. Notice is sufficient, must be sufficient to inform the public of the subject matter that will be considered. The more critical the topic, the more critical the information. Basically, stuff on your consent agenda doesn't need a whole lot of discussion. Approve minutes, approve financial report. Stuff on your deliberation agenda requires more information. And general descriptions on your deliberation agenda are not enough. If the city has a website, then notice has to be posted on the website of your meetings. As an alternative to posting notice on a physical bulletin board, notice may be posted on an electronic bulletin board at a place convenient to the public at City Hall. The Open Meetings Act does not apply to conventions, seminars, or workshops where no formal action is taken and any discussion of public business is incidental. So when you go to TML and you're talking about policy decisions and things, you're going to these meetings and talking about things that affect your city. Those are not meetings because you're talking about them globally and you're really not making decisions. You're getting information. Social meetings. You can be at Dairy Queen and having a cup of coffee. You just can't talk about public business. And testimony before legislatures or agencies. You can also have Thanksgiving and Christmas together and it's not a meeting as long as you're not talking about public business. Minutes have to be prepared and maintained, which this is a staff function. That's what Sandy does for you. Must state the subject matter of each deliberation, vote, order, or decision in the minutes. Secret deliberations by members by telephone for the purpose of arriving at a decision or consensus concerning public business are not allowed. So you also cannot leave or send emails, voicemails, text messages for the purpose of arriving at a decision. This is where, it kind of gets, there's a gray area. It's like, okay, I have this piece of information that I need to share with the other council members. You're supposed to do it in this room. If you do it by text message or email, or you try to meet in numbers less than a quorum for the purpose of secret deliberations. So, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? So that you're making decisions that are outside the view of the public. That's what this is trying to prevent. Walking quorums are a form of secret deliberation. That's where you have an overlapping series of meetings or telephone conferences with less than a quorum present. We try to stay away from those. Executive sessions, those are the portion of your city council meeting that is not open to the public. Those are allowed for very limited purposes: economic development, personnel matters, real estate, consultation with your attorney. When you have an executive session planned, there has to be a certified agenda kept, and you can only talk about items that are on the agenda or are listed specifically in the executive session. So if something comes up on today's regular agenda and you wanted to go into executive session to get legal advice on it, you could do that. If it's not on the agenda, then you cannot talk about it in executive session. Or if it's not on the agenda as an executive session item. You cannot take notes. You can't take pen, paper, cell phones, computers, anything that you could record information in an executive session. You as members of the council cannot have that in the executive session room with you. Staff members do, because we're the ones with the information you need in executive session. Smartwatches, any kind of electronic device capable of recording or communicating with others are not allowed in an executive session. Final actions cannot be taken in an executive session. You cannot poll each other in an executive session. You cannot say, well, this is the way I'm leaning. What are you thinking? Executive session is for obtaining information that is confidential. Any discussion that you have that is not related to obtaining that information needs to happen in this room. You do not vote or take a poll or a straw poll or whatever you want to call it, or secret ballot or anything like that in executive session. This is technically the law, but I'm going to tell you I don't advise it. You can disclose matters discussed in a closed session, but you may not disclose the certified agenda or tape or the minutes from the executive session. If you disclose matters that you discuss in an executive session, they're no longer confidential. So while you cannot be prosecuted for it, it's a very bad idea to talk about to anybody what is discussed in executive session. Usually that's because, the city's bargaining position is compromised if you do, or it's a personnel matter that if that information gets out, the person you're talking about may sue you. So executive session, there is a reason for executive session, and you should maintain the confidentiality of that information. Videotaping, public meetings. The public has a right to videotape public meetings, have reasonable access. They can't put a camera or a microphone right in your face, but they can stand in the back and video all they want to. So what happens to any actions that are taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act? Well, that action becomes voidable, so it's of no, you have to redo the action if you violate the Open Meetings Act. Actions can be set aside by a court, but can be cured by a subsequent meeting that complies with the Open Meetings Act. Members who knowingly conspire to circumvent the act have committed a Class A misdemeanor, and again, that's $4,000 in a year in jail if you're convicted of it. Disclosure of certified agenda is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Social media, I think we kind of beat that dead horse unless you would like to ask me some questions. I will say, if the city has not adopted a TikTok policy, okay, then that's taken care of. If you are really the only people posting on the city's official city's official social media accounts should be your information officer, which I don't know who that is, but they should be the only one posting on that website or on social media. If you post anything on your personal accounts, you may have a, post for council page or Burris for mayor page. Make sure that you make it clear that you're posting your personal opinions on pending matters, and that your opinion does not necessarily reflect the position of the city. There is, I think on page 73, when posting online communications discussing city-related business, but which is not posted as an approved representative of the city, make sure that it is clear that you are speaking for yourself and not on behalf of the city by displaying a disclaimer that states that posting is the officer's own opinion and not necessarily that held by the city council, or any board or commission. And that about covers it. There's more information about social media, but I figure we are capable of reading that. And you haven't asked any questions about social media, so I'm not going to pound on that anymore. I've also included a list of resources with a link to your code of ordinances, your zoning map. You also have access on the TML website to handbooks for mayors and council members, guide to becoming a city official. You can also always reach out to me or to my law firm. I'm sure Bert would say do it through me because every time we talk to her, she bills us for it. So, any questions? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will, what time is it? 7:35. We'll close this and go into executives. You want to do that first? All right, do we have any public comments from anybody in the audience tonight? If not, then we'll go, at 7:35, we'll go into executive session. For the new council members, that means we leave here and we go into the conference room. Donna, you gonna be able to do that tonight?
Yeah.
We can roll you in there.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to get you a wheelchair so we can push you around.
Actually, I have one, but I don't use it.
Be back at 8:03.
Every one I've been to only last for 20, 30 minutes.
We're coming back in from executive session. Do we have any motion? Well, at the side of no motion, then we will close the the council meeting tonight at 8:04. Thank you.
Nice to have you.